All right. Today we're tackling one of the most infamous books ever written, Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince. I mean, this is a user's guide to power that's been making people's jaws drop for more than 500 years. So, what's all the fuss about? Let's get into it.
Okay, so Machiavelli wastes absolutely no time. He hits you right between the eyes with this really chilling idea. What he's basically saying is, if you try to be the good guy all the time in politics, you're going to get crushed. I mean, just think about that for a second. That one sentence pretty much flips centuries of thinking about what makes a good leader completely on its head.
And yeah, because of lines like that, his name basically became an insult. You know when you hear someone call a politician Machiavellian, it's never a compliment, right? It means they're ruthless, cunning, a backstabber who'll do literally anything to win. It's become shorthand for just cold, calculating politics.
So that's the reputation he has. But is that really the whole story? Was this guy just a teacher of evil writing a playbook for dictators, or, and this is the interesting part, was he just telling us a really uncomfortable truth about what power is actually like? To figure that out, we've got to go back and look at the world he was living in.
So, first things first, you have to understand, The Prince wasn't some academic paper written in a comfy library. No way. This book was forged in the absolute fire of political chaos, betrayal, and just personal desperation. For Machiavelli, this wasn't just some theory. This was a survival guide.
Okay, here's the backstory you absolutely need to know. Machiavelli? He had a fantastic career as a high-ranking diplomat. Everything was going great until his side lost. The super-powerful Medici family stormed back into Florence, kicked out his government, and then threw him in jail. And yeah, he was tortured. So when he finally gets out, he's got no job, no money, he's been exiled from his city, he's desperate. The Prince, you gotta see it for what it was. It was his resume. A crazy, high-stakes job application to prove he was useful to the exact same people who just destroyed his life.
And just look at the world around him at the time. This wasn't some peaceful, stable country. We're talking about Renaissance Italy, which was a total mess. A chaotic patchwork of city-states all at war with each other. You had scheming popes, foreign armies marching all over the place, alliances could be made in the morning and broken by dinner. Seriously, the only game in town was survival.
And the guys he was writing this for, the Medici family, they weren't some old, secure dynasty. They had just taken Florence back by force, and they needed foreign soldiers to do it. So their hold on power was super fragile. Machiavelli knew they didn't need a lecture on morality. They were in what he called a highly dangerous predicament. What they needed was a cold, hard playbook on how to stay in power and just stay alive.
And boy, did he deliver. He basically took the traditional rulebook for being a good leader, you know, the stuff written by famous philosophers like Cicero and Seneca, and he just lit it on fire.
Okay, let's take generosity, for example. The old school advice was always, be generous and your people will love you. Machiavelli says, nope, that's a trap. Think about it. If you try to build a reputation for being generous, you have to spend a ton of money, right? Pretty soon, your treasury is empty. So what do? You have to raise taxes on everyone. And guess what? Now they all hate you. So he argues it's actually smarter to be seen as stingy, because at least the state stays solvent.
He does the exact same thing with the idea of cruelty. I mean, everyone agreed. Cruelty is bad, period. But Machiavelli points to something that actually happened in Florence. The leaders tried to be merciful and didn't punish some rioters. And what happened? The whole thing spiraled into a total bloodbath. His point is that one swift, decisive act of cruelty right at the beginning would have actually been more merciful, because it would have stopped all that chaos before it started.
And then we get to his most famous or infamous piece of advice, lying. The classical view is simple. A ruler's word is his bond. You always keep your promises. Machiavelli just scoffs at that. He says, look, men are fundamentally untrustworthy. They'll break their promises to you the second it benefits them. So a smart ruler has to be ready and willing to do the same. He even points out that the most successful rulers in history were the ones who were masters of deception.
And he has this brilliant analogy to illustrate the point. The philosopher Cicero had said that using force, like a lion, or deception, like a fox, was beneath human dignity. That's for animals. So what does Machiavelli do? He takes that exact same image and flips it. He says, no, a successful prince has to be both a lion and a fox. You need to be the lion to fight off the wolves, but you also need to be the fox. You can see the traps.
Okay, I know this all sounds incredibly cynical, right? But for Machiavelli, there's a cold, hard logic to all of this, and it all goes back to his fundamental belief about human nature.
So what's the reason for all this brutal advice? Well, it really all boils down to one thing: his incredibly bleak view of what people are really like. And here it is, pretty much the foundation of his entire philosophy. He says that people in general are ungrateful, they're fickle, they're liars, they're cowards, and they're greedy. Ouch. So if you're a leader and you're basing your strategy on people being noble and good, well, you're building your castle on sand. He argues you have to deal with people as they actually are, not as you'd like them to be.
And this is where he completely redefines this key Italian word, virtue. Now, before Machiavelli, virtue meant, moral virtue, being a good person, being just, pious. Machiavelli throws that out. For him, virtue has nothing to do with morality. It's about skill. It's about strength. It's the ruthless pragmatism to do whatever it takes, good or bad, to achieve the most important goal, which is to maintain the state. In his mind, this wasn't about being evil. It was about serving a higher purpose, the stability and survival of your country.
Which brings us to probably his most famous question of all. Is it better to be loved or feared? For Machiavelli, the answer is just a cold, simple calculation. Love, he says, is held together by a chain of obligation, but since men are self-interested, they'll break it whenever it's good for them. But fear? Fear is held in place by a dread of punishment, and that never fails. So his conclusion is blunt. It is much safer to be feared than loved.
All right, so here we are, 500 years later. This brutal little book has been banned, burned, condemned, and studied obsessively. So why does it stick around? Why are we still talking about Machiavelli today?
Well, it's because these core ideas have just echoed through the centuries. Let's break them down. First, a ruler's #1 job is to keep the state secure and stable. Period. To do that, politics needs its own set of rules, completely separate from everyday morality. A leader has to learn how to not be good and be willing to use evil when they have to. But, and this is a huge but, they must always look like they're virtuous to the public. And finally, don't trust mercenaries. You absolutely need your own army, your own force.
And so we're left with this huge, lingering question. Was Machiavelli just writing a recipe for tyranny, a handbook for dictators? Or was he maybe the first true political realist, someone who just pulled back the curtain and showed us the ugly, uncomfortable truth of how power really works? Maybe the most disturbing thing about The Prince isn't what Machiavelli wrote 500 years ago, but how much of it still feels so familiar today.